So first up here, there was actually only 6 animals in the beta. I don't think that's really talked about during the beta. A lot of people just kind of focus on what kind of items were sold and how it was cool, you know, some of the items were sold in the beta. But there was only 6 animals: the tiger, the wolf, the bunny, monkey, koala, and panda. It wouldn't be until, I think, about 2 months after the game actually launched where a new animal would be added. Yeah, there was like no ocean animals, no flying animals even. It was just these starting 6, which, you know, even back then seemed like a lot for a lot of people. Yeah, those were the original 6 animals. Now, kind of bouncing off of the last fact as well, I think this is a given, but there was no membership features or restrictions in the game at all. I imagine there's going to be people in the comments being like, oh, why can't we go back to that time period? How much membership restrictions there are now in the game. But yeah, everything was non-member. I think Animal Jam definitely had the idea that they were going to actually implement membership pretty early on in the beta anyway, that's for sure. But every item was non-member, every animal was non-member, every den item as well, non-member. So you could pretty much experience the game at its fullest during the beta for what it is without having to, you know, spend money on it. You know, you just actually had to spend time playing the game in order to get the things you really wanted on the game at the time. Might be weird to think about, but there was actually only 4 lands available during the beta period of the game. I know it's kind of weird to think about Animal Jam being condensed down to those 4 lands given how the map is now on the game. But of course there was Jamaa Township, that's a given, but there was also Lost Temple of Zios, which I don't know if Zios was even established to be like a deity or whatever he is in the lore now. Way back then, I think it was changed to be called the Lost Temple of Zios somewhere, you know, early on or midway throughout the beta. There was also Serapia Forest, which was just called Serapia. The forest wasn't added onto the name later on until after the beta, I'm pretty sure. And then there was Crystal Sands as well, which only had the juice hut in it at the time. There was nothing else. And I'm pretty sure that was the only way you could play the claw machine back then, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it was just those 4 lands. It's kind of weird to think about, given there's like, I don't know how many lands now, and underwater areas as well. There was no underwater. Half of the map was grayed out. You only had these 4 places to go. Kind of bouncing off from the last point, but Lost Temple of Zios, as I said, I don't think they established what Zios was going to be pretty early on in the game, which is why the statue in the Lost Temple of Zios actually changed mid-beta, I'm pretty sure. So early on, it used to be this monkey statue, which would be later implemented as a den item in the beta party, which most of you probably know it from, but there are screenshots of it actually being in the Lost Temple of Zios, which I don't know what the name of it was back then. If it's in the footage on screen, you can see for yourself in the top right, but it was changed just to the normal Zios statue in the ground before it was raised up years later on. But obviously they had some kind of plans for like a king monkey, I guess, early on in the game, and then switched to the kind of Zios and Mira deities for the lore side of the game later on. But it's still pretty cool to look back on anyway, and it's cool that they actually did a nod back and made it a den item as well. Now most of you are probably familiar with this, but there was actually only 1 den available, and it wasn't the small house den you usually start with nowadays. It was actually the beta den, which we did actually get re-implemented into the game just quite recently. Everybody's been loving it, and myself included. I've also been loving it. But that was the original starter den back when the game first started. From what I know, they changed to the normal small house den. I believe that was just because of the styling of den items they were going for. They were more detailed and they had more perspective to them, I guess is the best way to say it, where the beta den is just kind of a flat kind of surface to it, where it's kind of pointing at you, if that makes sense. You'd kind of want items that are kind of pointing your direction to design it to full capacity, I guess. I guess I thought some items looked weird in it, and kind of wanted to go for a better styling of den with kind of a different perspective, which is why they opted for the small house later on. But even before the beta den, this was using the beta party, which is where they made reference to it heavily over the last few years. But really cool that it's back in the game nowadays, and you know, it's definitely a crazy non-member den anyway as well. 3 stories and a backyard, like it's pretty good. Might be a cop-out to include this as one section of the video, but beta items, you know, the clothing items in the game, I think there was about 50 or so clothing items in total during the beta testing period of the game, and it is worth mentioning, and it's kind of cool to see that, you know, footage of the beta period of the game while in stores, you know, checking out all the stores is still preserved, so definitely worth mentioning, and it's always cool to look back on anyway. I think most people are most fascinated by this kind of thing. Then here as well, beta den items. Is it a cop-out to separate both maybe you can grill me in the comments for it. But I'd also like to point out, that was it. Just beta clothing and beta den items. That's all the items you really had in the game. You know, there wasn't den music implemented into the game. There wasn't pets implemented into the game or anything. Just kind of really honing in that the game was quite more restrictive back then. Obviously, I don't think people even had plans for or ideas for Animal Jam adding those things. But when I see people, you know, kind of saying, oh, we wish we could go back to the beta now. No, I don't think so. You know, the game was a lot more bare boned anyway, compared to back then, compared to now anyway. Like, there's a lot more to do in the game. And back then, you know, you could only really buy items and watch educational videos, and that was it. And also play mini games, of course. But still, on topic of customization, limited color options as well. There was very, very few color options in comparison to how the color palette is for animals now. And same with just customization for animals in general. There was far less eyes, there was far less patterns you could choose from, and also the smaller color palette. You know, you have a vast amount of customization options now compared to back then. It was very, very far less anyway. That, you know, it's worth pointing out. I'm pretty sure this color palette was still the same after the beta. I'm pretty sure it's like until like 2015, I think is when they changed it. Around then anyway, I'm pretty sure, because I remember when they changed it. You know, still hoping for someday that they update the color palette again, but I don't know how they do that without like maybe breaking the game or the inventory UI. So yeah, one can hope though, one can hope. This is a weird one, but the game looked a lot more 2D. I don't think that's really talked about a whole lot. You know, even looking in the items in the inventory and even in the stores, they had a vast different perspective in it. I don't know if that's just how they chose the items to render back then, or if it was literally just how the items rendered in the inventory, but the icons looked a lot different, and it was like this for all the original beta items back then. And they kept this look until about 2011, 2012, and that's when they decided to change it to a more 3D modern look that we know about nowadays for these items. And I think it was how the items were rendering, because as I said, they were still keeping that look of items even post beta for items that were released after beta. So it's not just a beta fact, but you know, it started in the beta, so you know, yeah, it is a beta fact. This definitely is like an old thing that I don't think is talked about too much though, and I'm quite nostalgic for it, because when I started playing the game, items looked like this. So definitely a cool thing to think back on. This is another weird one, but when your animal slept during the beta period of the game, you didn't have sleeping eyes that you see now. It was actually just wide open. Your eyes would stay open. You would just be on the ground lying down with your eyes open. I don't know if that's just, you know, a beta thing where like they hadn't implemented it yet and they were planning on doing it, but they just kept it as normal as a placeholder, or what. I don't know, but it's a thing that was in the game, so here you go. I want to say I probably talked about this in the very first old facts video, but the timer alarm clock was during the beta period of the game, I'm pretty sure, in the top right corner of your screen, and there was no settings, or I'm pretty sure during that time it was only the alarm clock. Obviously this would give way for parents to set timers on their kids while playing. I'm pretty sure it would just log you out after your timer expired, so you couldn't play more afterwards. But they got rid of this. I'm not too sure why they got rid of it. Maybe they just wanted people to keep on playing more without their parents' knowledge. Maybe they saw it like limiting people's play times. I don't know. But it's definitely a removed feature that's kind of weird to look back on anyway. Spoke of minigames earlier on, but there was actually only 11 minigames back then, which I'm pretty sure there is about like close to 100 minigames if you're counting the micro games as well in the game now, which is kind of crazy to think of. You know, there's that much variety they can choose for minigames now. A lot of the minigames back then were very simple. I'm pretty sure a lot of them were buddy minigames. Of course, there was like stuff like the claw machine as well. You know, I'll put them all on screen because I'm not looking at them as I'm saying this, but these were the only ways you could, you know, get gems back then. So it was pretty crucial for people to play these in order to, you know, actually buy items and, you know, decorate their animals and dens, which was pretty much all you could do other than just chat to people in the game. This one here is a cool one to me because I like name tags on the game. I think they're a really cool thing, especially the old look of them. But the beta even had an older look, which this was used for, I think, 2 months or 3 months during the beta testing period, where it'd just be this kind of solid yellowish looking tag instead instead of a member tag, because obviously there's no membership, you know, so there was no member name tag or even a non-member name tag. It was just a name tag pretty much. The only differences was the paw icons. I think your name tag had like the blue paw icon, your buddies had the green, and people you weren't buddies with just had the yellow. I think that was really cool. And I think it was like near the end of beta, like a month beforehand, they adopted the member tag that would be used for the next like 7 years on the game, which I'm also pretty nostalgic for, because that member tag a lot better than the weird hued colored ones we have now. That's to say the least. But bouncing off of names, animal names. You could choose your animal names. Obviously that's something that's still in the game now, but there was a set few of animal names that were removed after the beta testing period. And if you did actually name your animal one of these names, like it had one of the names in its combination, you would still keep it after the beta testing period. You know, there's still some accounts roaming around nowadays that still have them 15 years later, which is kind of crazy to think about. I've talked about removed animal names as a whole before, but in its own video before, but you know, stuff like Rosie, I'm pretty sure it was like a non-American way to spell it, so they changed it. Really dumb. I know there was Gross as well. I guess they just didn't want people to be inappropriate with it. There was Monster as well, which I don't know why that was removed, because I feel like that one's like the most normal out of the few, along with Rosie. There was also Mate, which obviously it was in the context of like friend or buddy or whatever, but I guess I can see why they removed that as well. But those are just a few examples. I'll put them all on screen, but yeah, these were just removed after the beta testing period when they were kind of refining the game and seeing what they didn't want in the game. This is a weird one as well. Gifting gems was apparently a thing. I don't remember this being a thing, I'm not gonna lie, but there's like a few blogs saying that it was, and I think it was on the wiki as well at some point that gifting gems was a thing. There's this screenshot here that says you have been awarded gems, which I think this was just something randomly that happened around the game as well. I don't know if this is the screenshot where people are thinking that's why gifting gems was a thing. Usually when you get awarded gems in game, because this was happening for a few years after as well, where you get randomly awarded gems or diamonds or whatever, that's just from AJHQ. So I don't know if, you know, moderators were going around the game giving players gems or whatever, but gifting gems, it's not something I personally remember. I don't remember a whole lot from when I played during the beta, but gem awards is something I do remember, and was a reused mechanic for years going on afterwards as well. If you watch some of the old fact videos already, you know this is a repeat. I'm sorry, but this is a beta edition one, so of course there's going to be some repeats. But the medical center was at the bottom of Jamaa Township. This was the one room that I don't think a lot of people knew what it was for. I guess this would end up becoming Dr. Gab's animal hospital in Kimbara Outback. I'm pretty sure that's the name of it, right? I guess this was like the early version. They had like an idea that they wanted some kind of animal hospital, like vet area in the game, because obviously you're playing as animals. But obviously the medical center was not finished. It was looking like a construction site, if anything, from what I can remember. And like even the soundtrack that would play in the game when you would go into it would be construction work going on. So obviously very clearly not finished, and did get removed later on. And I think it got replaced by the pillow room, and I think now it's where Club Geoz is. So a lot of changes to Jamaa Township's layout, which we'll get out onto later on in the video. But speaking of Club Geoz, its layout was also different. It was very subtly different that I don't think people even realized. But the DJ turntable wasn't there, I don't think. I think it was just like a little podium, if anything, on the right side of it. But there, in the bottom left, there was also another little kind of area you could walk into that was kind of elevated from the normal area. That kind of random that they removed it and changed it. I don't know why, but they did. You know, the DJ turntable one is kind of an obvious given, but yeah, I don't know. It's just a cool little thing that I don't think a lot of people noticed, so I figured I'd point it out as well. Obviously going on, the old Jamaa Township layout, it was a lot different. Okay, I think where the diamond shop is now, Jamaa clothing was. I think where the Soul Arcade was where Club Geoz is, and I think besides Jamaa clothing might have been Jamaa furniture, and it changed mid-beta as well. Like Jamaa clothing and furniture ended up going in the places they ended up being now, like midway through the beta, and I think Club Geoz moved to where Alpha headquarters is now as well. They rearranged it a bunch. I'm not too sure why, because I don't imagine that was an easy thing for them to do, but they were very particular and picky anyway where things were going, which I'm alright on. You know, some people complain how delayed it is where they moved the pillow room all the way to the top, but I think it's fine with how it is now. You know, the pillow room deserves to be tucked away where nobody can see it, in my opinion. I'm surprised that I mentioned this earlier, but Old Crystal Sands, the appearance of the land changed not until I think 2011 actually, so it stayed this way in its appearance for a while. I don't really know why they redid it, but they did, and it kind of suits the styling of the other lands now, so maybe that's why they did it. But there was also not a whole lot going on during the old Crystal Sands. Like there was only the juice hut and that was it. Like there was no aquarium, there wasn't any slides, there wasn't any kind of walkway to Mount Shavir or anything, because obviously Mount Shavir didn't exist at the time, but you get what I mean. It was very limited and kind of not a whole lot going on in the lands. There was like a bunch of statues and the dodo there as well, but I missed the dodo though, I will say that. I wish they brought that back. Obviously there was like a, you know, a period on the game where hackers brought people back to this as well, but you know, even if they did like some kind of event where they made all of Animal Jam's lands looking where they did in the beta, I think that would be pretty cool, just in like a little idea. But I wish there was some way to, you know, at least revisit this legitimately anyway nowadays. Talking about animal eyes once again, when you made a new animal during the beta testing period of the game, it would have this default eye of the googly eyes. I'm pretty sure that's what it's dubbed as internally anyway, but this is different from what it is now, where a lot of the default eyes is just this one on screen for a lot of animals. Like the fox, for example, has this as the default eye. I know there's some animals that have this eye as the default eye. I know the bunny does, but it had the googly eye as the default for all the original 6 animals. I'm not too sure why they changed it, to be honest, but I guess it's just one of those things of Animal Jam being like over particular about certain things, because 1, I don't know why it was this one in the first place, and 2, I don't know why they changed it. So it's just kind of funny to look back on though. Now, I kind of referenced this earlier on, but beta variants of items, I think, is another one worth talking about. I know I talked about like the beta tiara and the beta hood and stuff, but stuff like the tiki masks and the wings and top hats, you know, they had even older beta variants before the beta even started. This is when like in-house testing was going on at WildWorks. You know, they had a bunch of beta variants that never even got released into the actual beta testing period. So I guess it was like the alpha testing period of the game. These variants showed up. And you know, I made a video talking about it recently, so I'll go in too in depth here, but there's a lot of items like this that just don't have the variants in the game nowadays. I know they're re-releasing a bunch of these old variants, but still a lot of them are essentially deleted or quote-unquote unreleased, which is how a lot of people looked at them back when these were first discovered. Here's another one that's kind of weird that this was removed, because I really don't know why it was removed. Maybe it was removed in favor of the journey book that would come out later on, but plant facts, they were just like little herbology facts that you could click on around the game. You know, just another educational side of the game that I was kind of puzzled on why they did remove, actually. You know, there's still these little info pop-ups, I guess, if you will, around the game nowadays, but as for the plant stuff, yeah, no, that stuff has been long gone. But once you collected all these herbology things, you'd get like a little achievement. I know that was shown in the launch trailer of the game, but yeah, just kind of weird that they did actually remove it. Speaking of achievements there as well, there's a lot of old achievements that were added in the game's beta period of the game. I don't think achievements were added pretty late on into the beta, so there wasn't too many that were from the beta testing period, but just a lot of old achievements from around the beta testing period, from launch period of the game, that remain unreleased and unobtainable. I know the herbology expert achievement, that's unobtainable now. You could get it legitimately, but anyone that has it now obviously got it illegitimately, you know, through the use of tools and hacks and stuff. You know, a lot of people got some of these old beta achievements by doing that, but there's a lot of them, like most notably, I think the animal bases one for all 6 of the original animals had like base visits for achievements for each respective animal. I'm not too sure what that would have even been used for. I kind of theorized it was like an early version of the animal only parties, but I'm not too sure. Like there's just some other ones as well that also match kind of elements from the beta, or at least styling of the art direction anyway from the beta, so I figured it was worth mentioning as well, even though achievements were kind of a very late on into the beta addition to the game. Then here, saved it for almost the last one, because I think this one is quite the interesting thing, but there was only one tail item in the entirety beta of the game, and for probably almost a year, actually, it was the only tail item in the game, despite it being removed after the beta testing period, and this was the Scullies. It kind of felt out of place in comparison to the rest of the items in the game. You know, when you're sorting in your inventory, you can sort by everything but tail items during that period of the game, so it's just kind of weird, but it was also, I think, the cheapest item in the game at the time, or one of the cheapest items anyway. These were removed for inappropriate reasons. You know, they looked inappropriate on pandas, so they were removed after the beta testing period, and they never came back until a few years later after public outcry, because hackers started showing them off, which I've made an individual video about that because that's like a funny time period on the game. But yeah, definitely a interesting one because, as I said, it's the only tail item in the game for a long period of time, and I don't think even a lot of beta players even knew about it when it was in stores. Then lastly here, we're talking about membership, because after the beta did end, Animal Jam gave players a free membership if they participated in the beta. You got a full month free membership to experience the game how it is after the beta with membership, so you could engage in activities that became member only or things that were new and just member only after the beta testing period ended. And additionally as well, you know, during the beta testing period, they were advertising membership, you know, based off the screenshot right here. I think this is like a month before beta testing period ended on the game. This is like a really old screenshot that I really wanted to point out as well. So like, you know, they were considering adding membership very early on in the game anyway. Well, it was also cool because you actually got a subscription to Nat Geo Kids magazine when you bought a membership on Animal Jam back then, and that's something I completely forgot about until, you know, researching for this video. But like, that is such a cool thing to think of back then, and it sucks that they discontinued that on like pretty early on in the game's life, but I don't imagine it was like really worth it in terms of income for them anyway, because they're probably losing money by doing that. Still a really cool thing to look back on for sure, and kind of a old time period because, you know, Nat Geo Kids no longer works with Animal Jam, so just very interesting. Yeah, that's going to wrap it up here. I think this will be the last video I talk about beta stuff. I know I kind of been swamping the channel with a bunch of that stuff recently, but I kind of just want to talk about that stuff because, you know, 15th anniversary of the game. I think it's a really special milestone for the game. That it was worth, you know, looking back in time and how Animal Jam's kind of evolved over the years and how the game used to be 15 years ago and how far it has come since then. I think after this video, I'll make a compilation of like all the old Animal Jam trailers and commercials and advertisements, because that was a commonly requested thing after the last two old facts videos, because I kind of asked if you guys wanted to see it and then I just didn't do it, but I'll be on your lookout for that in the next few days. But after that, I'll probably end this little kind of celebration videos we've been doing for the beta testing period of the game. But hopefully you guys enjoyed and maybe learned some new stuff, or at least a little bit of a nostalgia hint on these last few weeks when I've been uploading these. Big thank you to the members as always. They've been helping out a ton on the channel with the support. If you want to see some exclusive stuff, like exclusive videos, make sure to join as a member, and you also get your name shown here near the end amongst other perks like sneak peeks on videos and stuff. But that'll do it for me right now. I have a few big videos in the works, so you'll see them when you see them type of thing. But once again, a big happy anniversary to Animal Jam. 15 years later, we're still kicking it somehow. Here's to another 15 more. Am I right, guys? I don't think that's gonna happen.